Yeah, and Father, Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you, Lord, for this time that we can have together. This peaceful time to worship you, Lord, to sing praises to you, and to just dwell on you, think about you, Lord. And I just pray that you would use this time to really help us draw closer to you and feel more spiritually alive as we make our way through this difficult life. And I just pray all this in the name of Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand. We're going to skip the first song for the sake of time.
What's the first song?
1,000 times I've failed, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, I'm caught in your grace. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. My purpose remains the art of losing myself in bringing you praise. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. In my heart and my soul, consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Times I've failed, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, I'm caught in your grace. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. Myself in bringing you praise. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. In my heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Justice you, though troubles linger still. Who shall I fear? I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is the friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. My strength is in your name, for you alone can save. You will deliver me, yours is the victory. Who shall I fear? Who shall I fear? I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is the friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And nothing more against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. Nothing more against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. You are faithful. I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The God of angel armies is always by my side. All right, you may be seated. We're just going to have a short devotional today. Before we get to that, let's open up with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you once again for everything that you've done for us, Lord. For the hope that we have, for the life that we have, for the future that we hope for, Lord, that we put our faith in. I just pray, Lord, that each and every day you work in our hearts. Each and every day you would remind us of who you are and why we should always remember you, why we should always keep you in our hearts, that we may follow you all the days of our lives. I just pray, Lord, that as we read your word, as we talk about it, that it's not my words, Lord, but your power, your dwelling in us, Lord, that would really inspire us, encourage us, and really just help us to lead a life that is really according to your will, following your law, because your law is good. And I just pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. On Friday nights, we usually have our movie clip discussion lessons, and last time, we ended up checking out a part of a movie known as The Sixth Sense. Now, in that movie, the main character, a child psychiatrist, failed to help a certain patient, and for the rest of the movie, he is trying to redeem himself by helping a new patient in similar circumstances. And as we were watching through it and discussing it, I was just kind of reminded of how that is, such a common theme. The idea of redeeming yourself. We're all bound to make mistakes. We're all bound we're bound for failure eventually. But sometimes we mess up like really big. We make some huge mistake, and we certainly wouldn't like to be remembered for that. Nobody really wants to be labeled as a failure. But sometimes, whenever we make like a big blunder, one that makes an impact on how people view us, sometimes people lose their trust in us, or lose their faith in us. We're going to want a chance, maybe desperately, at redemption, to redeem ourselves in the eyes of others. We want to make things right. It's an especially big deal when it comes to a team effort, like in sports or perhaps esports, if some of you care about that. How big a deal it is when one person, makes quite a mistake, and everyone's like their eyes are all on that person, maybe even judging or accusing that person. And you don't want to be that guy or girl who in the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. And if you yourself ever find yourself in that spot, that situation where you feel like you've really messed up big time, you're going to try to redeem yourself. Try your hardest to regain the people's trust. This is going to tie into the message. But first, as always, I like to make sure we're all on the same page. Last week, we took a bit of a detour. For those of you who did show up last week, you might remember that Brother Michael provided us with a fun and informative message about Martin Luther, the major figure in the Protestant Reformation. He even showed off some neat Martin Luther fashion and helped us learn these lessons with fun, interesting games that I'm sure you will not forget anytime soon. However, now we're going back to our weekly journey of following the story of the ancient Israelites. They've, if you remember, from 2 weeks ago, they reached the promised land. They made it to the place they've been looking forward to for 40 long years. They've kind of been, trapped in the wilderness for a while. But their struggles are far from over. They made it, but it's not over yet. Moses dies by the time they reach the promised land. Moses has to move on because of a mistake he made. And Joshua, his helper, his right-hand man, took over the leadership. And he was given the challenging task of leading the Israelites into the promised land, which meant taking them into war to defeat the nations that were already living in the promised land. So that's where we are right now. And so we're just going to get started with the reading. And we're just going to start from verse 2 of Joshua chapter 2. And it reads, "The king of Jericho was told, 'Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land.' So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, 'Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land.' But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, 'Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from.' At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them.' But in verse 6 it says, 'She had taken them up to the roof and had hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut.'" All right. So, we kind of just jump right in. So the context here is Joshua sent spies, 2 spies in particular, to investigate the area. And these spies, they're checking out the land. You know, this time it's a bit different from what happened 40 years ago. These spies, they're not coming, they're not going to go back and spread a bad report. They're just there to make sure they can get the job done. These are faithful Israelites ready for the mission, ready for the war. And so they made it, and they snuck into the city of Jericho, and they found a place to hide. They found a woman named Rahab, a prostitute, and you know, so they're there, they're hiding. But apparently, you know, these spies didn't do a very good job of hiding the fact that they were indeed spies. Because, as we find out just now, the king of Jericho knew about these guys, and even knew the exact spot where they were hiding. So, tough luck for these spies. They apparently did not do a very good job as spies. You know, they're supposed to go in and out, undetected. But here, but as we keep reading, we find out there's, you know, a twist, okay? Quite a surprise for those who perhaps never read this story before. Surprising, right? She makes a bold decision to help the Israelite spies. She says in the beginning, oh, I didn't know they were spies, but she knew they were spies. And instead of letting the king's soldiers know about these spies, she hides them and even misleads the pursuers with the lie, telling them they're already escaped. Go chase them out. Now it's kind of hard to imagine why she would do this. I mean, can you imagine helping out a bunch of spies from a foreign country in their plans to invade your country? It's quite surprising to see that she does this. I mean, she goes against the king of the city just for the sake of these strangers. It's not like these are spies that are friends of hers. It's not like they're family members or anything. They're just total strangers. And if they're spies, I'm sure by all accounts, you'd think they deserve to be turned in. It's not like she was harboring innocent children or civilians from being captured or tortured or executed, right? It's not like how in U.S. we had the Underground Railroad help the slaves escape the South, escape slavery, head to freedom, right? We see those people, we see them sacrificed for these slaves, and we think, well, that's admirable. It's not like World War II in Europe. There are some, good Samaritans, so to speak, that rescued Jews from the horrors of the Holocaust, right? That's important. And it's not even like the Bible story that we had just looked at recently in Exodus about how, the kids were being thrown into the Nile River, so people might have tried to hide the children and to save them and protect them. This is different. We're talking about hiding spies. Foreign spies. Who would do that? That's what she does. And while in most stories that would be something frowned upon, in this story, this is something we find admirable, because this is for the good side, right? As we continue on in our reading, we get some sort of explanation as to why she does this, so let's check that out. Continuing on from verse 8, we're going to read all the way down to 15. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, what you did at Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men assured her. "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." So she let them down by rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. So, based on what we just read, it seems that news had been spreading about the Israelites, even though it has been 40 years. 40 years, quite a long time. I mean, you guys. Well, okay, yeah, it's always been whenever we talk about 40 years, that's a really long time, right? It's like a lifetime. You go back 40 years and it'll feel like a completely different time period.
Yes.
And so, for them to think, okay, 40 years ago, the Israelites escaped Egypt through the sea, and they still remember that. They still know about that, and they're still amazed about that story. So the rumors and stories about them, 40 years, even after 40 years, they had maybe even grown. People far and wide had heard about the crazy things that these Israelites experienced. They had heard about the parting of the Red Sea. They had heard about how this nation of former slaves had defeated the powerful armies of the Amorites and had completely destroyed them. And because of these stories, the people of the land were afraid of the Israelites. They were melting in fear. And that's pretty ironic when you think about it, right? 40 years ago, the Israelites, they came to this land, and when they saw the people of the land, they were so frightened. They just wanted to get out. They're like, we can't do this, God. But apparently the people of the land thought the same of the Israelites, right? So it's kind of ironic there. Regardless, though, as we read this, what is the reason that she helped them out? Why did she betray her own king? Betray perhaps her own people? Right? It's kind of unthinkable for us, when we think about ourselves in our country, we always, think about how, we should try to do what we can for our country, right? But for them, for her, she didn't care that much apparently about her kingdom, but she did care very much about her family. Now she believed that it was God's will that the Israelites would win and would take over the land. She knew which side was the winning side, and did what many would do in that situation, right? She joined the winning side. She and her family would live because she helped the Israelite spies get away. Now, this was her redemption. I mean, who was Rahab? By all accounts, we're looking at a very ordinary woman. I mean, she's really barely mentioned in the Bible. There's maybe like 3 total mentions of her in the entire, in the entire Bible. Now, if I were to ask you before this lesson who was Rahab, I'm sure there's a few of you who might know about her, but maybe not all of you, right? Because she's not a particularly important figure in the Bible. She wasn't a prophetess, she wasn't a priestess, she wasn't royalty. What was she? Just a prostitute. A prostitute in perhaps what some would say the right time, the right place. A coincidence. She was not having some wonderful, privileged, luxurious life. She was just, when we think of prostitute, someone who sells the body to make ends meet, to survive. There's no pride or joy in what she does. And of all the people in that city, she was the one to have taken in the Israelite spies. Now, they could have gone to anyone to hide out of desperation. They were just trying to find a place to hide, but they went to her. And it was no coincidence. Of course, it was the hand of God that they went to the person who knew who they were and chose specifically to hide them for it. He placed these spies in her hands, And she was given a choice. God gave her the choice of a lifetime, the chance of a lifetime. And she could have, since she knew who they were, easily she could have turned them over to the king. But she truly believed that God was at work. And in verse 9 she says this, I know that the Lord has given you this land. She knows. I mean, she did this knowing that the land was already theirs. No matter what choice she made that day, she knew that the Lord would prevail. She knew that God had already given them this place. It was, for her, it was not if they would win the war, but when they would win the war. So for her, this was really just for her. She could not change the overall outcome. This was her chance to make the right choice, one that would change her life forever. And we know just how much a difference it makes in her life. Because of this one decision to help the Israelites, God protected her and blessed her. We find out later on that she becomes part of the lineage of King David, and by extension, she's part of the line of Jesus Christ. Someone who, just doesn't seem all that special from the beginning. Now, we all make mistakes. As I said in the beginning, we all have failures. I mean, we all sin, right? But that's not all there is to you and me. After all, if we look at Rahab, we see an amazing transformation. We see someone who, at the beginning of the story, when we first read about who she is, what kind of job she does, I doubt any of us would want to be in her position. I don't think any of us, when we read about Rahab, we're thinking, yeah, that's who I want to be, right? No, we don't envy her beginning. We don't envy where she came from. But she changes. Her whole life is changed. Normally when we think about redemption, we tend to think about self-redemption, like how I talked about in the introduction. We as human beings, we have this desire to redeem ourselves in the eyes of others after our failures. But this is actually different, right? This is not what we do, but what God does for us. God redeems us. And as we see here, it is wonderful when He does. He kept His promise with her, and saved her, and protected her and her whole family, and they prospered within the Israelites. Even though we may sometimes feel like we messed up big time, God always, as long as we're still in this life, offers redemption for us, offers hope for us. All it takes is that one decision, that first decision, the decision to believe in God and trust in Jesus. After that we've made that decision, then comes the truly hard part of living a life dedicated to Him. But once we've made that first decision, we're already redeemed. And from there, we can have that wonderful relationship with Him. We can have that hope always, that things that we don't have to feel like ashamed or like a failure, because we have that redemption in Jesus Christ. So let's end in a word of prayer and close with that. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for redeeming us. We were, when we were born, just failures, really. We're sinful from birth, Lord. We started out just with nothing. We brought nothing into this world. We can take nothing from it. We are nothing, Lord. Just the dust of this earth. From dust we came, and to dust we will return. But in that time, Lord, you saved us. You rescued us. You redeemed us by your blood. You offer us hope and a future every day of our lives. So we should be thankful. We should be grateful of all that you do for us. And we should be able to, thank you so much for that. And I just pray, Lord, that as we live our lives each and every day, help us to remember you. Help us never to forget you. Help us to read your word, to pray to you in times of good and bad, all the time, basically. When we're sleeping, when we're awake, when just how for us to always be, mindful of you. just help us to live that life, follow your law, and I just pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.